Y'all in the winner's circle, shot some squares though. You in the killing fields, ignoring the scarecrows. Yeah, ho, I'm Benny Blanco in the last scene, making the power play high off of caffeine. This is a tag team, fair to see the bad dream. The male version of Carrie killing the class queen. Bati bloggers quit dodging my emails. Take that whack shit off, the real revamp.
Welcome to Free Lunch Podcast, home of the New South Movement and the New South Movement Network. This is your boy Tight, one half of the Free Lunch Podcast duo. BG, we back at it again.
Got a great show in store for the people out there. Man, I just want to take time to say to everybody that we appreciate them following the movement. We're getting close to 100 shows, bro. So, you know, we built up a little cult following. People giving us great feedback. So I just want to say thank you to everybody that's been rocking with the Free Lunch Podcast.
And BG, you definitely, you accurate in that statement, with the 3 podcasts and the 4 podcasts in the network. We really seen a bump in the numbers, a lot of variety that's happening in the podcast with the New South Movement Network. So we like to applaud you, the audience, our listeners, for continuing to tune in. Continue to provide us feedback, give us your thoughts. We'll continue to bring you guests like we have today.
It's been kind of a crazy week, right? Been working hard, going hard in the paint. How you feel?
I'm tired, but we do this for the people. He ready. He ready already. He ready already. Hey, BG, we can even just squash the kind of intro that we typically do because we got family today. We got a guy that's been on the show in the past, and you know what, BG? He's actually his interview is actually one of my mom's favorite.
If it passed the mom test, then that's very important, I think.
And for those that don't recognize that voice, that is a friend of the podcast. He's always willing to when we reach out, he's game. He's down to talk to the listeners. And no further ado, we like to welcome Bill Ayers to the show. How you doing, Bill?
Very well, thank you, and it's so good to be back with you.
Brother Bill is our first return guest. This is our first guest that we've had on for a second time.
And so BG, it is an honor.
I want you to check in with your mother and make sure this isn't the last time I'm on.
I definitely won't. Oh, it won't be. It won't be.
It won't be.
Yeah, she literally, when she heard this interview, when we first released it, Bill, she was like, this is a great interview. And this is why we do this platform and use this platform. So we definitely wanted to have you back. And it was really, we were hoping we would be in Chicago, but, due to unforeseen reasons, we decided to have you on the podcast. But, we recently saw you in the news. And when we saw you in the news, we said, okay, it's time. It's that time of the year. It's that political season. It's a lot of conversation and, that's happening. So we felt like this would be the perfect opportunity to have you back on the show, rocking the Free Lunch Podcast hat. And of course, I'm sure you have the Black Lives Matter shirt on. Is that what you're wearing today as well, Bill?
I always have it on. Yeah, I got my Black Lives Matter bracelet, and I wear it simply to signal to everybody where I stand. And I think it's important. I'm a 72-year-old white person. I think it's important for white people to see that you can be in solidarity. I also think my wife says it's a signal to the police that if I get in trouble, don't come and help me.
Yeah, exactly. Help is on the way.
Help is on the way. So
if you wear that T-shirt, get the Black Lives Matter kids to help you. And I say, okay, that's good with me.
And what triggered us to want to have you back on the show, Bill, was in Chicago, back during the primary season in Illinois. We read an article and we saw some commentary, and it's funny because my brother, who also listened to the show, was the one that triggered me, that you were back in the news. So again, shout out to my family. But can you kind of take us back to that point in time, when Trump was actually preparing his rally, There was a
Sure.
lot of confrontation happening. What were you out there doing?
Well, let me back it up just a little bit further. Donald Trump has gotten a lot of media and a lot of attention for a couple of things. One is he has a message, and the message is kind of a nativist, I think, white supremacist, reactionary message about fearing other people. And there's a lot of things about that message that go hand in hand. One thing is he puts himself forward as a great man with a great mind who can do great things. But it's never about us. It's always about him. It's never about working collectively or collaboratively. It's always about the strong man accomplishing things that no one else can accomplish. And that message works when he has what I think of as a kind of a patriotic rally or almost a fascist rally. So what you see in these rallies is the strong man in front of a crowd, and the crowd is adoring him. The crowd is swooning over him. What happened in Chicago a month or so ago is that when it was announced that Donald Trump was coming to the near west side of Chicago, the students at the University of Illinois really began meeting in earnest right away. And the Black Lives Matter students began meeting with the immigration rights students. And those students began meeting with the Muslim students. And the queer students hooked up with the women's liberation students. But all of them began a conversation about how we don't want to be the foil for Donald Trump's adoring rallies. What are we going to do? And they began to organize a protest. I was called by one of the students 4 or 5 days before the rally, and I was asked to get a ticket so I could go into the rally. And I did. I went online and got a ticket. This was part of the strategy of the students. And what they did was so brilliant. Well, I'll take you to that day. Let me take you to that day. So we had a rally of about a couple thousand students on campus, a couple thousand people. And we marched from the center of campus to the pavilion on the edge of campus where the rally was to take place. I was wearing my Black Lives Matter t-shirt, but I also had a ticket to go into the rally. So our protest was about 10 feet from the line of people going into the rally. So I simply walked across the street and joined the line to get into the rally. And I was in that line for about 2 hours. I was talking to people, arguing with people, mostly just talking. And frankly, most of the kids in that line were suburban kids who didn't have much of an idea about politics, but they came down to see the spectacle of a Donald Trump rally. And we talked, a couple of them had just read Ayn Rand and they were on fire with some silly ideas, but mostly they were pretty apolitical kids, overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly suburban. So I was in the line and we made our way to the front. And when we got in, it was apparent that there were about 4,000 people who were there to protest Donald Trump's presence and about 6,000 there to support Donald Trump. At that point, he canceled the rally. It wasn't because we threatened him. It wasn't because anybody was saying he couldn't speak. It was because his rally depends on the crowd being an adoring crowd. We were not an adoring crowd. So he canceled. And at that point, there was some pushing and shoving, mainly from the people who were frustrated that they'd come down in order to see this spectacle, and the spectacle was denied to them. So they began pushing. But what was great about it was that we really showed how these things can be countered. You can't allow him to have an adoring crowd with 2 or 3 dissenters who get beat up and who he calls disgusting people. You have to show that as far as we're concerned, Chicago, Illinois, and the United States is a multiracial, multicultural, diverse, and dynamic and wildly different kind of place. We don't want to be in the country that he's imagining. We want to be in a country that we're not yet in, but a country like that can bring us all together in common cause and common concern.
The guy that does my cleaning and the cleaners that I attend, he's aware of who you are. He when I told him I first had you on the show, he was very interested in listening to the podcast. He listened to it, enjoyed it. But he told me here recently that he is a Donald Trump supporter. He said that he likes that he doesn't believe that it's a message of hate, but he likes how he's anti-establishment. He says what he thinks. He appears to be authentic and not a true politician. What would you say to someone like Mr. Robert that is supporting Donald Trump because they feel as though he's anti-establishment and he isn't one that's going to essentially do the same as the old politicians have done?
Well, I appreciate the idea that people are turning away from the kind of tried and true Democrat, Republican, establishment, because those two parties, I used to call them the Repulsicans and the Hippocrats, but now I think they're just one party called the Republicrats. They both believe in war. They both believe in Wall Street. They both, believe in surveillance and mass incarceration. We don't have an alternative to those things. When Donald Trump puts himself forward as authentic, there's something true about that. But the problem with it is he's authentic with a message that is very degrading of Mexicans and immigrants, that's talking about not only, unrealistic, but really hateful kinds of policies like building a wall, throwing out all Muslims, not allowing any Muslims into the country. That's an absurd position, and it's a hateful position. What we need, if you want to be anti-establishment, go on the other side and find Bernie Sanders. He's not my ideal candidate, but at least he's speaking openly about sharing the burdens and the problems, about his mild brand of socialism is attractive to many people, and also because he's not part of the cookie cutter politician. Here's the problem with your friend. He should look more deeply, A, into Donald Trump's policies, B, into his career as a billionaire. You don't get to be a billionaire simply by playing by the rules. You get to be a billionaire by, through predatory practices, through exploitation, through those kinds of things. And while a lot of Americans dream they too could be a billionaire, actually you have to be a pretty ruthless and messed up person to imagine getting to that kind of position. So I would say, while I don't trust the Democrats or the Republicans, I don't automatically then go and say, oh, the corporations are all good. The corporations are horrible, and they should not be running our democracy. And frankly, our democracy has been for sale for a long, long time, increasingly since the devastation of the Voting Rights Act, since Citizens United, and since the disenfranchisement of poor and minority voters all over this country. This is something we have to correct.
But your juices had to get flowing, though, Bill, when you got that call from the students to participate in this protest. How long did it take you to deliberate and decide that you were going to be a part of it?
14 seconds.
That sounds about right.
There was no question. I was going to go demonstrate anyway. And, the last time, you all were too young, but the last time I was in a rally like the Trump rally, I was in a rally in Cleveland for George Wallace, the segregationist from Alabama, when he ran for president in 1968. I was a community organizer in Cleveland. I went to the rally with 2 African-American organizers and 3 white organizers, and I've never been more frightened in my life because it was like being at a Klan rally. It was like you were in a space where the mob was unpredictable, and they could have turned on us at any moment and kind of torn us limb from limb. We had a lot of kind of pushing and shoving and throwing us out, but it was scary. This one wasn't quite that scary because there were 4,000 of us in there, but it had the same vibe, the same feel. It wasn't a feel of empathy. It wasn't a feel that we are all in this world together. It was a feel that there are the good people and the rotten people, and we had to kind of turn on the rotten people. And frankly, the rotten people are overwhelmingly the people who, a jingoistic, nativist, white politician would turn on. Muslims, immigrants from poorer nations, African Americans, gay people. And you look, for example, look right now at what's going on. Well, we could look at Washington, D.C., where there's a big fight back going on today. But look at what's going on in North Carolina, where they're scapegoating queer people for the purpose of actually passing some pretty far-reaching anti-Black and anti-labor legislation. So they're saying you can't sue the state if you have a disagreement. They're saying, they're shortening, they use the occasion of the Supreme Court destroying the Voting Rights Act, which so many of us fought so hard for, and the Supreme Court swept it away. And instantly, North Carolina led the way, but there were many, many states that passed legislation that said, these people can't vote, these people can't vote, let's make it harder to vote. Instead of, if we were in a robust and true democracy, we'd be saying everyone should vote. Let's expand the vote. Let's not find ways to make it harder to vote. Let's have, when you turn 18, you're automatically registered to vote. Why not? And why say that you can't vote on Saturday, or you can only vote on the second Tuesday of November? What is that about? I mean, that's suppressing the vote. Why say that if you have a record and you are a convicted felon, that you can never vote again? You're no longer a citizen. That's outrageous to me. And that's the kind of thing that's going on in North Carolina, all over the South, and really all over the country.
Still sticking with the Chicago and Donald Trump incident, we saw what we saw on TV. The media replayed the exact same images over and over again.
Right.
And so it really gave us a sense of that. I mean, from my perspective, from afar, it looked like it was chaos. Was it really that bad? I mean, and then also, the follow up to that is, were there enough police in there to facilitate that rally?
Well, there's no question, as the police themselves said, but we'll come back and talk about the Chicago police in a minute. But what the Chicago police themselves said is they did not tell Donald Trump to call the rally off. They had no doubt that they could secure the rally and have him have a secure place at the rally. There was no question about that. And there was no pushing or shoving. And so the images you saw on TV happened after Trump canceled. And he never actually came to Illinois. He stayed in Ohio. So he never intended to come. Once he realized that there were going to be several thousand people who were opposed to him inside the hall, he had no intention of coming. When they canceled, that's when the people who had come to hear him felt betrayed. And they felt, who are you going to turn on? There's nobody there except us. And so they turned on us. There was pushing, there was shoving. It wasn't particularly violent. It wasn't terrifying at all. It was simply some pushing and shoving and some anxiety. The cops were fully in control of the situation 99% of the time. It just wasn't as big a deal as it looked like when you saw that same image over and over and over on television. But what you did see, and I think it was repeated then in the weeks following, is that if you want to make a serious protest of a Donald Trump event, then you have to be inside in numbers. You can't go in one at a time and walk up the aisle and have somebody smack you in the head. No, that actually serves the purpose of the kind of adoring rally. But what we did was quite different. The students did it. And as usual, you talked about the Black Lives Matter and the kids. As usual, I found myself following the youth. The youth are the ones who organized this. They were brilliant. The fact that my name was in the news is just silly, and it's mainly Fox News. So anyone who recognizes me on the street, I know they watch Fox News because I'm kind of a foil for Fox News. But no, it wasn't organized by, by the older people. It was organized by students and by youth, and it was a very effective rally.
You talked about all of those different people with different backgrounds that were there in protest, and it's just disappointing that's not reflected.
Exactly.
That the real, in my eyes, the real Americans and the people that really hold American values true are coming together and say, we don't want this type of rhetoric. We don't want this type of, stuff thrown around. And we definitely don't want somebody that's spewing that type of information being the leader of our country. So I just hate the fact that doesn't get more recognition on mass media. That's
why we're on the podcast. You're getting the message out. Earlier when BG called said you got a cult following, I wanted to interrupt and say, no. You've got an engaged, intelligent, smart, active, wonderful following. And let's get it on. Let's keep it going. But you're absolutely right. I have certain moments in my life. First of all, I'm very much a realist. I know what's happening. I have my eyes wide open as I can get them. But occasionally, and this rally was one such occasion, frankly, the night Barack Obama was elected in 2008 was another such occasion where I'll be in a group of people and I don't want to leave. And the reason I don't want to leave is because this is the world I want to live in. I know I don't live in that world. I know the sun will come up tomorrow and it'll be a harsh sun. But frankly, that night at that rally on that campus, you saw a Muslim young woman wearing a headscarf shouting out in solidarity to the queer rights kids. You saw the gay kids shouting out in solidarity to the Mexican American and the immigrant rights kids. You saw the dreamers stand up and embrace the Black Lives Matter kids and vice versa. It was one community, and yet it was 1,000 branches. It felt marvelous. It's the world I want to live in.
What happened once you all got outside of the actual auditorium? Was there, again, what we see on the television is the police officer with the bloody head. We hear a lot of pushing and shoving was going on, harassment. What was happening once you got outside of that actual building on that day?
Well, when we got outside, there was some pushing and shoving. I left, as most people did. I didn't stick around forever. At that point, the rally was over. We felt we'd won. We chanted and walked away. But, the proof that there wasn't any real violence between the two camps leading up to it is that I crossed from the protest into the line of people going into the rally. I'm wearing my Black Lives Matter shirt. A lot of kids come up to me and want to talk and argue, and some want to take pictures. But I never felt threatened. I never felt that anybody was going to hurt me, and I wasn't going to hurt anybody. We were simply people having a disagreement and an engaged dialogue. Frankly, that's what, if democracy means anything, it means the ability to talk to strangers. And that's what we were doing that night until the rally was canceled. And then a lot of people were unhappy. But it wasn't us who was unhappy. It was the Trump supporters, and they were unhappy because their man didn't show up. And he didn't show up in a calculated and cowardly move to not talk to the people who disagreed with him.
So it's so much in so many directions we can go in, because I'm interested in hearing about your relationship with Fox, because immediately your name was dropped by none other than Sean Hannity. And it's almost as though there's a bromance between Brother Bill and Fox News.
They have a cartoon character of me that they like to hold up and beat with a stick. But that's not me. And you know me better than they know me. I mean, better than, by far. And the reality is, as I told you when we all met together in Atlanta, the reality is that I am an activist. I've always been an activist. They hate that about me. But I've also became very well known because of my time in the Weather Underground. And that would have faded into history, except that I got well known for being a friend of Barack Obama's. And they love to make that connection. Like somehow the fact that I knew Barack Obama and the fact that I was, underground for 11 years and the fact that I was a fighter, all that stuff came together in their fevered dreams to create what I think of as a cartoon character, an avatar called Bill Ayers. It's not me. You know me. I am somebody who writes a lot. I'm somebody who participates in society. I'm a grandfather. I'm a father. I care a lot about those roles. And so they've got me as some kind of terrifying crypto terrorist, but it's not true.
Let's talk about Chicago, though, Bill, because one of the things in my mind, when we talk about Trump and when we talk about this polarization between, like you kind of stated, the good and the bad of America. And in the South, we know that the South, because we're from here, has a rich history in racism and segregation and discrimination and all sorts of that. And in our minds, the North or the Midwest is a little bit more forgiving when you talk about those lines. Were you surprised in the number of supporters that showed up at that Trump rally, or was that somewhere within your expectation of, what that type of turnout would be?
It doesn't surprise me that 6,000 people would show up for a rally like that. And as I said, many of them were just curious. And I think that's been true all over the country. I don't think he has the kind of support that he imagines he has. He has people who are curious. He has some people like your friend who think, well, at least he speaks what he thinks. And we're so used to hypocrites and liars talking to us that just speaking from the hip or being honest seems like, wow, that's really different. That's really cool. But I would not, overestimate that. I think that's, I wouldn't put too much stock in that. But let's talk about Chicago. Chicago is a city that's, well, first of all, it's widely known as the most segregated city, in the country, right? It goes back a long ways, and it's a very segregated northern city. Our schools are badly segregated, right? And this is something that people recognize, that people know. The other thing, as long as we're talking about Chicago, I don't know if you saw the report that came out last week about the commission on investigating the police. Did you see that report?
I did.
Okay, this is very significant. So after the murder of Laquan McDonald, and after the mayor and the state's attorney and the political establishment hushed it up for over a year, and after we got a ruling and a campaign led by the young people to get that video and that autopsy released, and after we realized that this young man was executed on the streets of Chicago, all hell broke loose, as it should have. And one of the things the mayor did to try to save himself was created a commission. Everyone expected that commission to be just a whitewash, like typical, instead of doing anything, you appoint a commission and then you let things die down. This commission came back with a report that is absolutely electrifying. And I urge your listeners to look for it. It's the Chicago Task Force on Police Misconduct. And it comes back and it literally says that the Chicago Police Department has not only a history of entrenched institutional racism, but it has no regard for the lives of people of color. That's a frightening thing to have said. And they said it. And we were so pleasantly surprised, even though we were horrified, but at the same time, we knew that was true. But for them to say it and for the mayor to have to accept it, that was incredible. Now we have to get busy and do something. But this police report, let me just say one other thing about it. It also called for a civilian elected police oversight committee. That would be an incredible advance over what we've got. What we've got in Chicago is not only an institutionally racist police department, but as everyone in Chicago knows, if you're African American and living in certain neighborhoods, the chances are the police will stop you and initiate a confrontation. They will stop you and ask you for things. That doesn't happen in the suburbs. Even if you have a tail light out, if you're in the wealthy suburbs, the police stop you to tell you, hey, get your taillight fixed. They don't ask for your driver's license and registration. But here a kid can be walking down the street doing nothing, and he gets confronted by the police. Who are you? Where are you going? Let me see your ID. That policy and practice has to stop. And the statistics in this police report are frightening. The number of people shot by race, the number of people stopped, the number of investigations initiated that resulted in any disciplinary response at all, something like 6%. I mean, it's an incredible, damning statement. And it's linked, you guys, it's linked to the fact that we have schools that are underfunded, that we have housing that's not habitable, that we have a lack of jobs in many communities that gets up to 50% unemployment. These are the things we have to fix, and they're comprehensive and huge.
What is the confidence level of the current mayor in Chicago that he can turn things around and get things done, considering he was the mayor that was that's been at the head of all of this controversy?
Well, I think the mayor's popularity or his approval rating is in the basement. And what's interesting is he's about to have a confrontation with the Chicago public school teachers, which he's been fighting with for years. And the head of the teachers union has popularity up, in the 60, 70%, and the mayor's down in the 20, 30%. So I think he's not in a good, strong position to get things moving forward. And many of us have hoped that we could recall him. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think that a wounded Mayor Rahm Emanuel is in some ways a more hopeful figure than a fully powerful Rahm Emanuel. he in some ways has to be fighting for his political life, and in some ways has to make accommodation with the truth. And the truth is very damning. One of the other interesting things to know is I don't think he's going to resign, except one of the unless the people with all the money and the bankers and the top politicians put a knife in his back. But I do think that it's interesting that Hillary Clinton campaigned in Illinois and steered clear of him by a mile, did not want to be seen with him. And she was right.
In every newspaper, every news station, whenever you bring up Chicago, there's always this point to the violence, the level of violence, mainly in the Black community between Black youth in Chicago. And I always have this question of where does that stem from? And part of that question is rests in some of the history of Chicago being a violent place, even prior to this last 10, 15 years. So with you being there, being close to it, like what do you see as some of the catalysts for the level of violence that's going on between the youth there?
Well, I think there are many, many things. I wrote a book 15 years ago called A Kind and Just Parent. And I had spent 2 years in the juvenile detention center writing an ethnography of what these kids have gone through and what they're up against. I'll tell you a couple things. One is no jobs is an absolute recipe for catastrophe. If there isn't an economy that's functioning, if people don't have any hope of working, if people don't have anywhere to go to make a legitimate income, then you're going to have violence, you're going to have poverty, you're going to have all the social ills that we see. Add to that, if you don't have a decent school to go to, if you don't have a school that's got small classes and the teachers who are committed, you have a pretty grim picture. And so I would say jobs, education, and then social services, including mental health clinics, social workers, all those things are necessary to live in a robust, caring society. One of the problems we have in Chicago is in order to have those things, all the citizens have to believe that we are each other's brothers, that we are each other's sisters. And if you create a condition through segregation and through racial hierarchies, where you say some people are less worthy than others, some people don't deserve my empathy, well, then you have, the makings of a catastrophe. So I would say all those things are part of it. But there's another thing, and this gets to the real question of lethal violence. Teenagers are goofy. You agree with that, I'm sure. I mean, teenagers can be goofy, And so when Mayor Daley's son got into an argument with a former friend over a young lady, he hit him with a baseball bat. And he got in trouble with the law because he hit this kid with a baseball bat. Now, hitting a kid with a baseball bat is a little different than shooting him. So one of the things that astonishes me, when I went into work in the juvenile detention center, I had a standard question that I asked kids. I said, if I gave you $100, how long would it take you to get me a gun? And I was absolutely astonished by the answer. The answer was $100. How many you want? And when do you want them? These kids could get a gun quicker than they could get a library card or a trip to the lake or a visit to the museum. That's ridiculous. Here's a city with a beautiful lakefront, with world-class museums, with a music scene to die for, with a theater scene, with all the arts. And these kids who are locked into, controlled neighborhoods, who are locked into and isolated from the rest of the society, have never seen the lake. Some of them have never had a library card, and yet they can get a gun. So there's something horrible about the access to weapons, because as I say, teenagers will misbehave, but most of that misbehavior is not lethal unless somebody's carrying a gun. So let's get rid of the guns. Let's get rid of the drug trade. Let's have jobs. Let's have schools. Let's have libraries. It used to be in Chicago, every neighborhood had a small factory, a bar, a library, a school, and a church. All that's left is the bar in most neighborhoods. And that's a catastrophe of our making. It's not an accident. This is on purpose. This is stuff that we did.
One other thing in regards to Chicago, you're very, very, very tied to education.
I am.
Can you talk a little bit about the educational system? And I know you are huge on reform, education reform, et cetera. What are some of the things that you all are putting in place to kind of, I know you've been an advocate for education. Can you just kind of talk about education in Chicago at the current state?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, this is a huge battleground, and I wouldn't say that we're fighting, but I don't think we've won much. When you think of corporate school reform, what you're looking at is the effort on behalf of the corporations, a corporate class, the 1%, to do three things. One is to destroy the collective voice of teachers, to attack the teachers' unions. And whatever you think of the existing teachers' unions, we need the collective voice of teachers. So I look at a small school like where my granddaughters go, there's maybe 20, maybe 30 teachers there. Between them, they have 300 years of experience. We want their collective wisdom. We don't want to push that to the side. And yet the corporate reformers, including our governor, who's very much like the governor of Michigan, Rick Snyder, the guy who is responsible for the water crisis in Flint. And let me put a parenthesis in there. I don't think the world would know about the water crisis in Flint if it hadn't been for the ongoing activity of Black youth, Black Lives Matter. I mean, they put so many things on the agenda. But let me go back to Chicago schools. So crushing the collective voice of teachers is a retrograde, terrible idea. The second thing that's terrible is reducing education to a single test score. Test scores do not tell us who's educated and who's not educated. And the third thing is privatizing what should be a public responsibility. Making it a private profit is a mistake. So one of the things I always do in Chicago around the schools is I look at where the wealthy and the privileged send their kids to school, and I say, in a democracy, this is the baseline for what all schools should look like. So if you look at where Mayor Daley, Mayor Emanuel, Arnie Duncan, the former Secretary of Education, Barack Obama, where they sent their kids were to schools that had 15 kids in a class, that had a well-respected teachers union, that had all the arts programs, that had libraries. In fact, the school that Mayor Emanuel sends his kids to has 6 libraries. And yet there are 140 schools in Chicago with no library. There are 160 schools with no arts program. They would not send their kids to those schools, and yet they're advocating those schools for other people's children. That is hypocrisy at a high level. It's also injustice, and we have to oppose it. So what we're fighting for is, and you may have read that 2 years ago, Mayor Emanuel closed over 50 schools in one fell swoop in the Black community, on the West Side, on the South Side. And this is a way of further disenfranchising and oppressing communities. So it's something we've been opposing. We had this wonderful hunger strike in Chicago, the diet hunger strike that won a concession. But it's a damn shame that we have to go on hunger strike to win the minimal thing that human beings in a democracy ought to enjoy, which is a free, accessible, competent, excellent neighborhood public school.
Is that a piece of the larger puzzle? The thing is always, well, we don't have the money, we don't have the funds to support schools and school programming, but we can find money for wars and we can find money for prisons. And you see this in state after state after state, to where they're having to close schools and cut the budget for schools and things like that. Is this a part of a larger strategy to, increase the gap between the haves and the have-nots?
Well, it's hard for me to say who's got what motives, but what you're describing is absolutely true. In Illinois, we spent a ton of money in the last 30 years on prison construction and no state money on school construction. That's ridiculous. Those things feed each other. No schools is a direct line to prisons. And we talk about the school to prison pipeline. If you go to a school where control, discipline, order is the order of the day, you're getting people ready for prison in a certain way. So you look at where the rich send their kids. They have access to the arts. They have access to thinking for themselves. They have access to solving problems. If we don't allow that for all children, we can bet that some children will get a real education and others will be channeled into the prisons or the unemployment line. And you think about it, we got 2.3 million of our fellow citizens in prison. overrepresented with African American and Latino people. And what if those 2.3 million people were in the workforce? Well, then we'd have unemployment through the roof. So it seems deliberate in a certain way. You feel like it's on purpose. You know how it works in Chicago? The Chicago Teachers Union has a slogan, broke on purpose. And the reason they say that the schools are broke on purpose is because if you take the richest man in Illinois, a banker, a hedge fund manager, and you took, and if you taxed him at a reasonable rate, if he wasn't allowed to run his business to Panama and elsewhere, we would have enough money to fund the schools for 5 years just from this one individual. So we have 63 people in the world owning the same amount of wealth as 50% of the people in the world. That's insane. That's a recipe for catastrophe. We have to change that. And I think that we can, but I think we have to wise up. So when you say, where's the money? Yeah, part of it is military budget. Part of it is the carceral state, incarceration, surveillance. And part of it is you look at this thing that was just revealed about people hiding their money in Panama. You must have seen that story, right? That businesses have these tax havens in Panama, businesses and individuals. And it's estimated that U.S. corporations hide about $10 trillion of taxable money offshore. That's so don't give me this that we don't have the money. The richest country in the world. Now, my granddaughters go to a really nice Chicago public school, but you know that they have to bring their own toilet paper to school? What kind of city is that? This world-class city in the richest country in the world where people are hiding their assets offshore so they don't have to pay taxes, so my granddaughters don't have to bring, toilet paper to school. It's an abomination. It really is. And it's only one example. We need to have fair taxes. We need to share the wealth. We need to decide what we're going to spend our money on. And we've decided, not we, but I think the two major political parties have decided that a bigger priority is military spending, police spending, prison spending, and surveillance spending. And I want to oppose all that and say my priority is education, health, guarantees of income for poor people and for old people, and those kinds of things. And I think we need a big national debate about that. And frankly, I think Bernie Sanders is forcing us to have a little bit of that debate. That's not a bad thing.
Great segue into the national debate and the national story. We spoke about Trump, but can we talk about these other candidates? You have Hillary and Bernie on the Democratic side. Hillary recently been in the news with the super predator comments. And then you have Bernie, who is someone that's extremely leftist, and like to your point, he's bringing those conversations to the forefront and forcing the conversation around some of those topics. I don't want to leave out Kasich and Cruz because, to be quite frank, I'm more afraid of Cruz than I am of Trump.
Me too.
Because of his policies are documented and well seen. He did not, and he held up the signing of any type of bill being passed to help the folks in Flint, Michigan, and that was those were deliberate actions on his part. So I hear a lot of people scared of Trump. I'm more afraid of Cruz than I am of Trump. Not to say that I'm not afraid of both. But anyway, I said a lot to say, can we kind of transition and talk about the national conversation and these and essentially what we're being offered as voters in this upcoming election?
Yeah, but let's not be afraid of either Trump or Cruz, because we have each other, and there are more of us than there are them. Sure, they got power, and sure, they got the guns and the money, but you know what? They don't have us, and they don't have our hearts and minds, and they don't have the moral standing that's required to really do things and we, if we stick together, we are many, they are few. We have to learn to build unity amongst ourselves. But okay, I'm going to go with you, and I'm going to say yes. Donald Trump makes what I like about this election in some ways is everybody's standing naked. So Donald Trump says what they used to just whisper among themselves. You know, you've heard this idea of the dog whistle. So they used to say, let's not waste money in the city. And Donald Trump, and you know what that's coded for, let's not waste money in the city. Or as the governor of Illinois said several years ago, if you put money in the Chicago schools, it's just putting it into a black hole. Yeah, that's racially coded, right? But so Donald Trump doesn't have any code. He just says it right out loud. Mexicans are rapists, you know, women should be punished. They all think that. They all think that, but he says it. I like that about this election. When your friend says he's a straight talker, yeah, but look at what he's saying. I mean, he thinks those things, but so do the other Republicans. So yes, Cruz is a dangerous, dangerous person. He's to the right of Barry Goldwater. He wants a flat tax, which is punishment to the poor. One of his top campaign people says that abortion doctors should be executed. He himself shut the government down for the sole purpose of denying women access to Planned Parenthood, which is far from what people say is kind of an abortion factory. It gives women access to health care. It's outrageous that he shut the government down on that. So I'm agreeing with you. These guys are all pretty nasty. And the fact that John Kasich gets to be considered the moderate because he thinks if someone's father rapes her, that she should have access to an abortion. That's a moderate. The other guys don't even believe in that. So, I mean, you know, it's insane. On the Democratic side, I would not say that Sanders is extremely left, but he's a Roosevelt Democrat. That is, he's a social democrat who believes that we ought to be getting out of our wars and we ought to be spending more energy on creating a kind of a sane and socially responsible society. Here's my take on Sanders. Sanders has been on a steep learning curve about African-American struggles and African-American issues. And I think he's learned a lot, and I give him credit for learning a lot. You know, so he's got Cornel West and Killer Mike teaching him stuff, you know, and that's probably good. But his first statements were pretty silly and pretty dumb. But you think about it, he's a guy from Vermont, you know, he's been there his whole adult life. So he doesn't have a comprehensive understanding of the issues that African Americans have had to face. I don't know if you saw the exchange between him and Ta-Nehisi Coates. Did you see that exchange?
I did.
Okay.
But I saw the exchange, but I was kind of taken from it because I felt like the same question should have been posed to Hillary as well in regards to reparations.
I agree. And in many ways, the Black Lives Matter people have been posing it to Hillary. They have. But what Coates said that I think is worth remembering is that Coates said Bernie's whole signature, his whole campaign is based on the idea that he's going to tell it like it is, and he's not going to make political calculations.
Right. So
he goes to say, now Hillary never said, I'm not going to make political calculations. That's her middle name, Hillary Political Calculations Clinton. So, you know, she's on a different plane. So he goes to Sanders and he says, what about reparations? And Sanders' response is, it's not realistic and it'll be divisive. Well, guess what? Universal health care is not realistic and it's divisive too. So why this and not that? And what Coates said in response was, look, I can show you actual people with actual names who were harmed by redlining, who were harmed by predatory lending. I can show you the people. It's not a mystery. And why don't we think in terms of repairing that wrong? It's not so weird. When we put Japanese citizens in concentration camps during World War II, it took a long time, but eventually their descendants were paid reparations. Reparations simply means repair the harm. There's nothing wrong with that. There are all kinds of vehicles through which we could do it. You know, Jews in Germany were given reparations because they were harmed as Jews. And so it's not right to say, oh, well, everybody will rise if we just have good schools. That's true, but it's also true that African Americans face specific problems because of the legacy and the afterlife of slavery. And it's still going on. So I think I give it to Sanders that he's learned a bit, and that several people, including Michelle Alexander and Cornel West and Killer Mike, have been schooling him. And I think that's good. Hillary Clinton is getting it now too, and I think appropriately so. The Clinton administration, which Hillary backed, and she used that terrible, terrible term, the super predator. And if you look at my book, A Kind and Just Parent, I have a whole section on why that word is so disgustingly racist. And it's such a fantasy in the minds of people that, who have no clue as to what's going on in the community. So, yeah, she used that word back then. But frankly, Bill Clinton then doubles down and says it was a good bill. No, it was not a good bill. It led to mass incarceration. Welfare reform was a catastrophe. And he can say, well, people supported it. People supported aspects of it, but the parts that people supported never were enacted. So there was a jobs provision. There was a provision for education. There were all kinds of provisions that weren't enacted, but mass incarceration was enacted. I think Hillary should have to answer for that. And I think it's good that people are putting it to her. And I don't think it would be on the agenda if the Black Lives Matter young people weren't really, really active and really, really wonderful and brave.
I agree, because, as we sit here, as I sit here as an individual, there's a lot of things that would have been totally off my radar if it had not been pushed by the youth and by Black Lives Matter. But then you always have to deal with that argument, Bill, about, well, if Black Lives Matter so much, why is there so much black on black crime? That's one of the arguments that's really ramping up, even within the community. And
I agree, but my answer to that is that if you believe that Black Lives Matter, if you believe that black children, if you live in Lake Forest or Winnetka or wherever, these rich white communities around Chicago, if you believe that a black child has every much a right to a good, decent education and good health care as a white child who's born wealthy, then you have to invest in those communities. And that means, yes, breaking segregation, which we have not done. We failed to do in this country. But it also means investing in good schools. And so this is why I keep coming back to where the privileged send their kids to school. I don't want anything more than what they have. But I don't think it's reasonable to say our policy vis-a-vis youth or vis-a-vis children is a simple policy. And the policy is pick the right parents, choose the right parents. I mean, that's ridiculous. You didn't choose your parents. I didn't choose my parents. I just got thrust into the world and you got thrust into the world. But some people who get thrust into the world are thrust into a world with falling down schools, bad infrastructure, no health clinic, rotten housing, no jobs. And some people are thrust into a world where they get second, third, fourth, fifth chances, a decent education, safety in their communities. So if you think Black Lives Matter, and I do, and so do the kids who've been leading this movement, if you believe that, then let's turn around and invest in the city of Chicago. Let's make the West Side a gleaming place where there are good jobs, good health clinics, good schools, good libraries, and good transportation. We're cutting transportation also. That affects poor people much more than it affects middle class or wealthy people. We're not spending on the infrastructure to have decent trains. You saw what happened in Washington. They're going to shut down the metro because it's been underfunded, under-repaired. And I'm going off a little bit, but that's another example of broke on purpose. Here's how it works in Chicago. In the public housing, they stopped repairing buildings. Things would break and they wouldn't repair them. A faucet would break, they wouldn't repair it. A window would get broken, they wouldn't repair it. Then they stopped picking up garbage. Then they stopped sending the police when the police were called. And 5 years into it, they'd look around and say, that's a terrible place. No one should live there. No kidding. It's a terrible place because you made it terrible. The metro in Washington is terrible.
Yes.
By design.
Yes.
By design. They didn't repair it. They knew they should have, but they didn't. And that affects poor people much more than it affects senators or congressmen. They can get around without the metro, but people who are trying to get to work can't get around without the metro. That's policy. That's not a question of charity. That's not a question of everybody being in. It's really a lack of empathy, and it's policy to hurt some people and privilege other people.
BG, I've been on that. On that, he's dead on with the metro in DC, and I've even tweeted at the metro here just to complain about how terrible it is. Specifically the line that I take on a daily basis. It's ridiculous, and they literally had to shut it down.
What are you going to do when they shut it down? I mean,
they literally had to shut it down for an entire 24 hours in order to repair it, and folks couldn't get to work. It was ridiculous.
And you look at a place like Los Angeles, where they take the transit budget and they spend most of it to get wealthy people from the San Fernando Valley down into that is it San Fernando, that valley up north of LA, down into the downtown area, which are middle class and wealthy people who work in the financial district. And meanwhile, they starve the buses that get Mexican folks and African American folks from their neighborhoods to places where they can get a job. Well, if those things are shut down, or you have to get up at 4 a.m. to make 3 buses to get to work, of course, that's part of the oppressive architecture of the thing.
So global.
I wanted to get your evaluation on 2 things. President Obama is ending his 8 years as president of the United States. 2 questions. Number 1, what were your thoughts on him nominating his nomination for Supreme Court? And then number 2, how would you rate President Obama over his past 8 years?
Well, I've told you before that I'm not a big student of or enthusiast for electoral politics. I may be the only person on the left who wasn't disappointed in Barack Obama because 2 reasons, really. One is because he is a moderate. He always said he was a moderate. He's not a leftist. So I expected him to rule from the center. The other reason I would be hesitant to be harsh about in criticizing President Obama is that nobody faced more opposition than President Obama faced. It was outrageous. You look at the disrespect. You look at the unwillingness to move anything forward simply because it came from him. You look at the kind of relentless attacks, personal as well as policy and politics. I'm surprised the man is still standing. I give him a lot of credit for his own integrity, for his own mental health and strength. The old stories about Jackie Robinson and how much abuse he had to be put up with, on a daily basis. I think Barack Obama's had it even worse, So I'm cautious about judging. I also think that what moves things forward is social movements, and that's not on the president. That's on us. We have access to the workplace, the community, the neighborhood, the school, the classroom, the church, the synagogue, the mosque. We have to be mobilizing ourselves in those places. We have to be politically active in those places if we want to be critical of what's going on in Washington or in Springfield or anywhere. We have to mobilize ourselves and take responsibility for ourselves. I think one of the things that's very dangerous in the world we're living in now is the 1% has seized control of the political apparatus. The corporations have seized control of everything else, and people are set back on their heels and not activating themselves politically. It's on us to do that. In terms of the Supreme Court, I'm really pleased with the people he put on the Supreme Court, over his entire tenure. They weren't the people I would have put on the Supreme Court. I would have put on the Supreme Court Bernardine Dorn, my partner, and other people who are far left, because I think we need that. I think we need people who are coming from a perspective that will limit corporate power and limit the power of money, but that's not the people we have. So I've been pretty pleased with the moderate people he's put on. What I would like to see once Hillary Clinton is elected is I'd like to see her appoint Barack Obama to the Supreme Court. Then let's see what happens. Obama's presidency, was an exciting moment because it was a blow, not a fatal blow, but his election in 2008 was a blow against white supremacy. I think we should all celebrate that. I also think we should note what a hard slog he's had. And we should also note that his election caused the conservative movement to get a lot of energy and a lot of juice, just like the civil rights movement caused the conservative movement to take off. Barack Obama, just his presence, just the presence of a black man. You can't imagine. Well, you can imagine because you get some of this. The number of trolls I have on social media, the number of people who attack me. I got to notice after the Trump rally, somebody saying, "Good luck, Billy boy. Trump's going to be elected, and at last we'll get to fumigate the White House and have a white person move back in." I'm like, dude, that's the mindset of some of the real loonies out there. And I think it's something that we have to be very aware of.
BG,
it's real.
That is
it's
real.
It's real. It's real. And I'm just baffled by the fact that in 2016, as we claim to be as progressive as we are, that you still have people that are holding on to those type of ideas. But I don't foresee it going nowhere. It'll never be completely eradicated.
Well, yes and no. I mean, one of the things that I'm not entirely surprised either. But again, let's go back to Trump for a minute. You remember that he was endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan, and instead of saying, "I denounce that," he said, "I have to investigate." I mean, it's 2016, and you have to investigate the Ku Klux Klan to know if they're a hate group. It's nuts. So when you say it may never go away, that's true. On the other hand, if we were sitting here having a conversation in 1830, somebody would be saying for sure slavery will never end. It's just as natural as it can be. And then it did end. And yet slavery ended, and the afterlife of slavery came right into play. And then we had to have, so if the Civil War was the second American Revolution and the Civil Rights Movement was the third American Revolution, we're due for a fourth American Revolution, the revolution against mass incarceration, for decent schools for all, for the end of segregation, and a real blow to white supremacy. I think we can do it. I think we have to do it.
It's on the way. And you were out there with those young people, when you look into their eyes and they're standing up for a cause, what do you see? What do you see in those young people that are out there letting their voice be heard?
What's wonderful about young people, and it's true of you two guys too, but what's great about the youth is that the youth, they're at a point in their life where they think everything is possible. You get to a point in your life, when your life ends, of course, nothing is possible. But in between the moment when everything is possible and the moment when nothing is possible, we can live fully, we can love each other deeply, and we can create. And I look at these kids here in Chicago, they blow my mind every day. They are so brilliant, they are so talented, they're so committed, they're courageous, they're fearless. And that includes the Black Lives Matter kids. It also includes the undocumented kids. They wear T-shirts that say undocumented and unafraid. Man, who would have thought of that 10 years ago? I mean, and the black kids are wearing T-shirts that say unapologetically black. Wow. I mean, who would have thought of that 10 years ago, right? So we're in a beautiful moment, and it's a moment of hope, aspiration, and rising expectations. Those are moments when terrible things can happen, but also great things can happen. Let's make sure the great things happen.
What's going to happen in a few months from now? Who's going to be the next president of the United States, Bill?
Oh, I think Hillary will be the next president. More than likely. I'm not good at prognosticating, but if you just look at the raw numbers and the reality out there, you would have to say that the nakedness of the Republican Party, I think there's a very good chance the Republican Party is going to tear itself apart in the short term. And that if Donald Trump is denied the nomination, which I don't think he will be, but if he were to be denied the nomination, I think he'd run as a third party candidate, and that would rip the party apart. But I also think, who are you going to nominate if Trump is 100 votes short? Who are they going to nominate? The other thing, just parenthetically, that I'd like to say about the elections is, I think it's kind of wonderful that nobody actually knew how this primary process worked until now. Now we all see it. It's naked. What the hell is a superdelegate? What the hell does it mean that you count votes in Louisiana in the Republican primary in this peculiar way? I think it's great that this is all being made public, because then you realize we don't live in a democracy where every vote counts. We live in a plutocracy, and we live in a country that we need to change badly if the people are ever going to make the decisions that affect their lives.
One last Chicago question, Bill. Have you heard or seen Anita Alvarez? Where is she?
Well, Anita Alvarez ran, she was the state's attorney, for the listeners who don't know, and she was the one who failed again and again and again to bring justice to the community. She worked hand in glove with the police. And when the Laquan McDonald tape was released and she had tried to suppress it, her days were numbered. Kim Fox, an African-American attorney who'd worked in the state's attorney's office, ran against her. Kim Fox got more votes in Cook County than Donald Trump got in the entire state of Illinois. So that just gives you, when they say 48%, that can mean 400 votes, but what's important is that the Black Lives Matter youth and a brilliant community organizer named Miriam Kaba came up with the idea of hashtag Buy Anita, BYE, goodbye Anita. And this thing went wild. And I didn't know the night before it was going to happen, but she was crushed because of her bad behavior. And that's a real sign. What was great about that was the Black Lives Matter kids in the main have not gone into electoral politics, but they've affected electoral politics. They've impacted it. And that was the best example so far.
Another amazing show. Bye, Needle. And BG, I started laughing because on the Retroscope podcast, you and Simone the Shy Peacock, y'all spoke about that. So that kind of brought back memories.
Yeah, we had to go back to that one.
This has been good. This has really been good, Bill.
Will you call me again sometime?
Oh, definitely.
Remember, when you're in Chicago, you're always welcome to stay on the third floor here in my house. I got plenty of room. So I'd be happy to see you sometime in the city.
Definitely. And also if it's something that you want to get off your chest or you feel like it's something that we need to share, definitely reach out, let us know. And you're always a guest on our show, Brother Bill.
Well, you announced at the beginning that we're family, so I take that seriously, and I thank both of you for all the good work you do. And why don't you say hello to your girlfriend for me?
Oh, and I think that was for you, BG. And we see you holding that up.
You always starting trouble. I mean, we can't get through a show without starting trouble.
I know. That's my goal.
That's your movie. You're right.
I'm a troublemaker. I've been a troublemaker all my life, so I can't stop now.
Yeah, definitely. So, hey, what were you holding up just then?
I want to show you. When I was in Washington, I went to Harper's Ferry, and there's John Brown. You see him?
I do.
And look, you may never have seen
this. Well, hold it back up because I'm taking a picture of it.
Okay. This is John Brown, and, he's, as I've told you before, he's the only white person in American history I trust. But also then up here, over my shoulder, I don't know if you can see that, but I got my little Hall of Fame up there. Can you see it?
Yeah, we can. What are you showing us now?
Well, that's Nelson Mandela and King, Malcolm X.
Oh, wow.
Che Guevara. That's all my people up on the mantle.
I see.
Yeah, it's above the little fireplace. But, I went to Harper's Ferry when I was in D.C. I haven't been there in 50 years. I was hoping that they had improved the thing since I was last there. They've improved it marginally, but it's still kind of has John Brown as a madman, when actually John Brown, in a society that had gone mad, he was the sanest man in town. So I was a little disappointed, but I did make my pilgrimage out to Harper's Ferry to pay homage to a great freedom fighter.
And you know what? I've driven by Harper's Ferry a few times because a friend of mine has some property out that way. And I haven't done the tour yet, but I'm definitely going to be looking to do that.
You got to do it. It's worth seeing, and they've improved it somewhat. So they have, it's hard for people to remember, but Du Bois, W.E.B. Du Bois, wrote a book called Captain John Brown, and a serious analysis of why his role was so central in the struggle for freedom. And Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote books about John Brown. He was he was a great, great man and a good friend of Frederick Douglass, and just a brilliant, brilliant strategist. And the fact that he's still portrayed kind of as a crazy man instead of as somebody who had a serious plan to end slavery and played a huge role in ending slavery, I think we have to hold him up as a hero. And yeah, definitely go see Harper's Ferry.
What were you doing? I know we're gonna let you go here in a second, but what were you doing here in DC? And you were in Baltimore a few days. What tour are you on right now?
I got a book out that I'm on book tour with called Teaching with Conscience in an Imperfect World. And so I was doing that. So I read at Busboys and Poets, and I read at Red Emma's. But mostly I was in D.C. for the American Educational Research Association. I'm a former vice president of this massive group of educational researchers. And there were 18 or 20,000 of us in Washington for a week. And I was out there mostly for that.
BG, anything else you want to add to the show before we close out?
Not at all. We just got to have Brother Bill to give his website address and ways that people can connect with him and see what he has going on. Okay,
it's easy to get me, but I also have a website at billayers.org. I got a Facebook. I got a Twitter. You know, I'm not quite as hip as you, but I'm trying to keep up.
Again, this was outstanding. This was amazing. BG, what you got? Yep.
Yes, sir. We are the Free Lunch Podcast. You can check for us, freelunchpodcast.com for podcasts and, different content that we have out. Also, we are Free Lunch Podcast on Instagram, Free Lunch Pod C on Twitter. We're on YouTube, Free Lunch TV. We are a part of the New South Movement Podcast Network on iTunes and SoundCloud. Check for us. Just search New South Movement. We'll be right there. Give you access to this, the Free Lunch Podcast, the Retroscope Podcast, the D1 Sports Talk Podcast, and the Girl Talk Podcast. So holler at us. Let us know what you think.
Hey, thank you a lot. Thank you a lot for joining the show. And
thank you. Good to talk to you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good week. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.